Finland and Sweden have formally applied for NATO membership, but both these Nordic states are better known for Turkey and Hungary. Turkey says Finland has been a haven for Kurdistan Workers' Party, which has been at war with Ankara, demanding a separate state. Here's why Turkey opposes the entry of these two Nordic states in our special segment called The Explainer.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has managed to find allies to scuttle NATO's plans of a further eastward expansion.
The Russian invasion, allies have significantly stepped.
On May 18th, two critical Nordic states, Finland and Sweden, presented their applications to NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg to join the grouping. While it initially felt like a smooth sailing affair, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan expressed strong views against Sweden and Finland's entry into NATO. He accused the two Nordic countries, in particular Sweden, of serving as a refuge for the terrorists of the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Ankara's Bet Noah.
Bizi ikna etmeye mi gelecekler? Kusura bakmasınlar.
They are coming to Turkey. Are they coming to convince us? Excuse me, but they should not tire themselves. First of all, we would not say yes to those who impose sanctions on Turkey to join NATO, because then NATO would cease to be a security organization and become a place where representatives of terrorist organizations are concentrated.
Çünkü NATO o zaman bir güvenlik örgütü olmaktan çıkar.
Hungary also has raised objection to the new additions. Putin's closest ally in the European Union, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, has threatened to veto proposed sanctions on Russian oil that the other 26 member states have approved. With Turkey and Hungary opposing the move, can the NATO still go ahead with the membership?
The Turkish president brought it up himself, that you are on your way to NATO, and said that Turkey sees it favorable. But in the last week he said not favorable, and I think that many others have heard the same, that there are no problems, but now they've come up, and that means that we have to continue our discussions. I am optimistic.
According to NATO rules, all 30 existing members have to agree to accept them. A veto will put a halt to the inclusion. Can Turkey and Hungary be kicked out? There is no provision of removal, only of voluntarily leaving the bloc. Article 13 of the treaty says that any country that wants to leave must send the US a notice of denunciation, which the US would then pass on to the other countries in the alliance. Meanwhile, the Ukraine invasion marks a huge shift in stance of neutral countries, like Finland and Sweden, who now are rethinking their security situation given the long border that Finland shares with Russia. Russia, however, says that it has no problem with Finland and Sweden joining the NATO, provided their soil is not used militarily by the NATO against Russia.
Территорию НАТО учитывает при военном планировании продвижения на восток.
NATO takes their territory into account when planning military advances to the east. So in this sense, there is probably not much difference. Let's see how their territory is used in practice in the North Atlantic Alliance.
Turkey, on its part, has adopted this position in the hope of obtaining relief from sanctions on the Turkish defense industry, following the latest purchase of the Russian S-400 anti-missile system. Ankara also has made it clear that it wants to use Sweden and Finland's applications as a tool to weaken support for Kurdish separatist groups.
And now we're being joined by geopolitical analyst and author Don McLean-Gill, who tells us about the geopolitical challenges that will take place following Finland and Sweden becoming members of the NATO. Don, many thanks for joining us here on India Today. What are the guarantees that Finland and Sweden have got from NATO should Russia act against them and the membership procedure is not complete?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And this is, in fact, a very relevant question given the change of events. So we have to understand that once the application submissions have been made, the decision moves to the North Atlantic Council, the decision-making body of NATO, then it falls to the parliaments of members to ratify. So that particular one-year period is seen to be the most vulnerable towards, of course, the security of Finland and Sweden. So despite the unlikeliness, of course, of a direct Russian attack on the two states, the UK, other Nordic countries, and of course the US have also offered security guarantees. So a joint statement, of course, was issued by Norway, Denmark, and Iceland to support Sweden and Finland's decision to join NATO. And they have also pledged their support and highlighted their readiness to aid the two states against any form of aggression on their territories. The UK went one step further, really, and perhaps provided one of the most significant bilateral guarantees to both states. Now, during the event of a possible attack, the UK will come to their assistance, including with military assistance.
Right.
And there have been specific comments on military, air force, and naval operations.
But Don, the fact that now we're looking at Turkey and Hungary creating problems and an obstacle, so to say, in the membership itself, doesn't seem like Finland and Sweden can become a part of the NATO anytime soon.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. But I think it is more of a delay from Turkey and to a lesser extent Hungary, rather than a complete derailment of the plan of letting the two states join NATO. Because Turkey and Hungary, to a lesser extent, their skepticism stems from their disappointment of being ostracized by major European states and the US, and how the West undermines, of course, their interests, sensitivities, and domestic affairs. So when President Biden, for example, did not invite them to the Summit for Democracy, the sanctions on Turkey, suspension of the F-35 deal, and of course, Finland and Sweden harboring members of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, all these things factored in provided the disappointment of these two countries. But I feel that this won't be a significant or permanent derailment, but it would be a delay, definitely.
Well, that brings us to the larger question. Now, if this is drawn long enough, Russia will indeed gain advantage because of winters and the need for Russian gas. Has that been really factored in?
Right, absolutely. And I think all the European states right now are scrambling for natural gas from other producers. You know, competition will further raise the already high prices. In fact, Italy has announced supplies from Algeria, Germany from Qatar. But these deals are for long-term sustainability and may not really significantly address the short-term issue given the approaching winter. So, of course, the limited export terminals for LNG in Qatar, the US, and other key exporting countries of LNG would be a problem. It will take years and billions of dollars to build back. And of course, we have to understand that while the reserves are satisfactory, you know, if you look into the long term, what about next winter happening next year? Would they be able to sustain that significantly? I think that's where the problem lies. And European states are well aware of that as they're currently scrambling for it. But definitely, if Russia decides to cut them off during the winter, it would be a significant challenge for their economy and, of course, their energy security.
Playing devil's advocate here, Don, US continues to say in many ways than one, not in my backyard. And it's far away from the war theater. But Russia cannot object to NATO expansion. Why?
Right. We have to understand that the US is an offshore balancer, which means that despite its dominance in terms of material capability, this means having more confidence to really constrain the abilities of countries like Russia to really project power in Europe. So we have to understand that power, geography, and perception really play a significant role in understanding the US, Russia, NATO dynamics. You know, after the 1999 round of enlargement, Russia, in fact, in 2000, President Putin, expressed his intent to join NATO. In fact, this was also acknowledged by the by ex-NATO chief George Robertson, acknowledging this. But really, when the series of enlargements happened right after, you know, Russia, under President Putin, also realized that this would be a far-off deal, and in fact, used that anti-Western sentiment to fuel nationalism within. Now, going to your question about not really being able to stop the enlargement, we have to understand the role of perception. See, Sweden and Finland are relatively out of the Russian sphere of influence, according to Moscow, compared to Ukraine and Georgia, for that matter. In fact, Finland and Sweden particularly have been going on with military drills with NATO for the longest time. So this has been factored in under the consciousness of Russian policymakers. And really, even if they wanted to do something directly provocative for Finland and Sweden, we have to understand Russian capacity has significantly depleted. 70% of their forces are focused on Ukraine despite the withdrawals. So we're really looking into a tight situation, given, of course, domestic consent towards President Putin. All these things have to be balanced accordingly.
Right. Right, and Russia has said that any military, any decision to join NATO will not really impact Moscow as such till the time their soil is not used against Russia. Having said that, my final question to you, any decision, whichever way it goes, is going to have stress points in Central and Eastern European nations. How do you see that play out?
Well, really, if we look into the possibility of Finland and Sweden joining in the alliance, NATO for that matter, we can see that, this could benefit to a certain degree the unique set of assets and capabilities of the two countries towards Central European security. But again, we have to understand that them being these two states being part of NATO would also be that there would be possibilities of more dangerous confrontations between Russia and NATO. As it has already occurred throughout the Arctic, there's a significant tension there, and of course the Baltic area. So we can see that these would be intensified in the future as well. So again, the situation remains tense, of course, but of course, looking into the material balance of power, we have to understand the constraints and opportunities that each state has given this particular scenario.
Don McLean-Gill, many thanks for joining us here on India Today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Time for a short break. On the other side, we'll talk about the wheat ban that India has imposed and the impact it could have on the global surge in wheat prices. Welcome back to World Today. Now, can the world avert the upcoming food catastrophe? Earlier this week, India imposed a ban on its global wheat exports, and various nations are reaching out to New Delhi asking if their requests will be fulfilled or not. Since the start of the year, global wheat prices have risen by 53%, and India's ban added 6% to it, taking the prices on its all-time high. India's move has drawn international criticism from Germany to the United States of America, asking New Delhi to reconsider their move. Let's try and understand the crisis. Now, the world's second largest wheat producer, India's indefinite ban on wheat exports has drawn international criticism, as well as the step has taken the wheat prices across the world on its all-time high. Now, let's break down for you what's the looming crisis all about. Cut to February 23rd, Russia launched an offensive invasion of Ukraine. The wheat exports from Kyiv and Moscow plummeted, which followed the dire shortage of food grains worldwide, as both the countries account for 1/3 of global wheat exports. Adding to the crisis is the blockade on Ukrainian ports, where around 20 tons of grains in silos is waiting to be exported with no signs for this year's harvest. India then rushed to fill the gap and increased wheat exports. Statistics show a drastic increase in India's wheat exports from 5 lakh tons in 2018-2019 to 80 lakh tons in the financial year of 2021-22. The further estimates show figures is expected to reach 120 lakh tons for the financial year 2022-23. What prompted the ban? Increased exports have caused inflation in India. Wholesale wheat prices have risen by 10.7% than last year in April. Another factor is the weather extremes. Heat wave in India has devastated the cereal fields, reducing crop yields. The countries that export largely from India are Nepal, Bangladesh, China, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Malaysia and Indonesia. Now, New Delhi backed the decision by saying that the step is taken to manage the overall food security for its 1.4 billion inhabitants. Before the ban, India had set a target of exporting 10 million tons of wheat this year. And then there was global criticism following India's ban.
We recommend a concrete decision on this issue at G7 meetings to which India is invited. We also call on India to assume its responsibility as a member of G20.
We think any restrictions on exports will exacerbate the food shortages. We hope that they can, as they hear the concerns being raised by other countries, that they would reconsider that position.
Now, what lies ahead? Clearly, New Delhi's decision has been focused on being self-sufficient first, and by doing so, the prices for wheat flour and bread are likely to fall. The prices rose by 14 to 20% in the past year. And for world, the prices will go higher for indefinite period as India's early assurance to meet the global demands gave hopes to avert global food shortage. Even though India has made exceptions for countries who are in dire need of food grains. Soaring global commodity prices have induced supply fears following the conflict in Ukraine. This further raises fears of famine and social unrest in third world countries. Exhibit A, Sri Lanka. Here's more news from across the globe in our segment, World at a Glance. Take a look.
A Russian soldier who has been accused of war crime has apologized to the widow of an unarmed 62-year-old Ukrainian man who was killed by the soldier. 21-year-old Vadim Shishimarin had pleaded guilty in the court. Russia has, however, denied killing Ukrainian civilians or any involvement in the war crimes. Iran-backed Hezbollah and its allies have lost their majority in the Lebanon parliament following elections in the country. A rival Christian party with close ties to Saudi Arabia, the Lebanese forces made gains and independent candidates promising reforms won 13 seats. At the Cannes Film Festival, Alpha Jet's Pétrole de France flew over the Top Gun Maverick premiere as Tom Cruise and co-stars looked on. It was the first time in 30 years since the actor made an appearance at Cannes Film Festival. Top Gun Maverick opens in cinemas worldwide from 25th May.
That's all we have in this edition of World Today. Stay tuned to India Today for all the latest news and updates.